Hey there, family. It's follow-up Friday. Not follow-up Friday. It's overtime.
Wow.
With Dave Safransky.
Yeah.
There he is, peeps. Right there. In
One
the
and
flesh.
only.
The one and only.
Take it all in.
Man.
There it is. So we're talking money with Dave today. We're going to talk about poverty in Cleveland for just a minute and what we ought to do about it. Before we get there, don't forget, like and share this. That's how we can spread the word about the show.
Callie said yesterday, she's like, did you guys realize I shared your video? So thank you, Callie. It's really a gift when you do that.
Yeah, thank you. Clicking share and commenting, it keeps the conversation going. So I've been sitting on these statistics and this article for probably 2 weeks now. Just
Literally
saying-
sitting on it?
He's
Well, there was
really
a
weird.
different
He
version.
does stuff like that. It's weird.
I do
feel
actually.
like you sit on a story
I
then.
mean, you wouldn't be surprised. Look at all this stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
But I just had it in a pile of articles. I didn't know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I felt like it was significant information, but it's significant information that feels hopeless. So I was like, I don't know what to say. And you have to, when you work in the radio, you have to have something to say.
It helps.
So I thought I would just bring it to you guys and see what you say. But what I don't want to do is just say, oh man, it's horrible, and then go, anyway, I got an appointment. You know, I want to see if we can do anything productive out of this. So in order to figure out what this truly means, I had to look at some statistics first. Before we look at child poverty, we have to understand what poverty really is. We have to, and first of all, it's relative.
Based on where you live, because the cost of living is different in Cleveland than it is in Miami or New York or San Francisco.
Right. And if you even compare across country borders, you compare poverty in sub-Saharan Africa or
Mexico.
India or Mexico versus the United States, you can suddenly get into a game of our poor really aren't that poor at all. I just don't like playing that game because we're in
solve
this
anything for
society
one
and it
thing.
doesn't fix anything. And the reality of poverty in our society doesn't disappear just because someone's more poor somewhere else.
Right.
And society's different here than it is in other places. So, for 2019, the federal government has guidelines that have to actually quantify what it means to be in poverty. So, for a family of four, you have to make $25,750 a year or less to be considered living in poverty, according to the federal government.
25,000.
$25,750.
Okay.
So you work with money all the time. What are you gonna be able to do with 25 grand in 1 year?
Now, the first thing that you have to back out is just my basic living expenses. So
Right.
I'm gonna rent an apartment,
Okay.
okay, and the apartment's gonna be $500 a month. So that's $6,000 immediately out of your pocket for the roof over your head. So now you're at 19,000.
Okay.
So as you back these things out, you say, well, I'm gonna spend, family of four, I'm gonna spend $400 a month on groceries at a minimum.
Oh goodness, bare minimum. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another $4,800 out of your total. So you could see how quickly.
Doesn't account water, electricity,
Yeah.
gas,
So
car, or bus
Mike is
pass.
saying to turn the volume up just to make sure. I don't know.
What?
Mike is saying the volume seems like it's down. Keep going. Go ahead. Go ahead.
But you can see how quickly your budget gets whittled away just by the have-tos.
Yeah, and tell us, by the way, if the volume is okay. Mike, double check your phone. But I think we're okay.
So you're saying the bare minimums in terms of you could barely make it with 25?
Yeah, I mean,
That's
I feel like
poverty.
25,750 as the barrier for poverty. That's not in America.
It's not a lot of money.
That's brutal. That's a really hard existence in our society. Yeah.
Right, and you know, there might be some older people that would say, well, when I first started working, I was making $4 an hour, and that's what. Well, inflation being what it is, costs have gone up over time.
Yeah.
So, in 1980, gas was 38 cents a gallon, and even though gas hasn't really risen with the inflation rate, it's still, if you're driving anywhere, and we. In this area of the country, we drive everywhere. We don't really have an effective public transportation system here. We just never did. And so you think about all these costs that go into your budget, pretty soon you're at zero or negative.
Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, then, it makes these statistics even more troubling. And keep talking to us about the volume if that's a problem, and I'll check.
Deborah says the volume is higher than normal. So I'm not
Oh,
sure.
wait.
Yeah, so just let us know if you.
Mike says it's lower. Deborah says it's higher.
Yeah.
Mike should buy the iPhone. It's got a better speaker. And I own that stock, so.
Yeah, there you
Hey.
go. So, brand new data out. Child poverty remains widespread, and it's a dangerous problem in the city of Cleveland. In fact, the city is one of only 2 metropolitan areas with a population of at least 205,000, where more than half the children live in poverty.
Mm.
We're in the top 2. Specifically, if you look at data over time, as far back as 2011, the National Center for Children in Poverty found that 53% of Cleveland's children were living in poverty. In 2019, 50.5% of the city's children live below the federal poverty line.
Mhm.
So you get a room full of kids, more than half of the kids from Cleveland are living in a household that's making less than $25,000 a year. You surprised, Dave?
Well, no, because traditionally Cleveland, so Cleveland was always a big steel mill town, always industrial. Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, very industrial in nature. I remember when LTV Steel was here, and it occupied that whole valley,
Yeah.
right on where 490 and 71
yeah.
come together,
Yeah.
the whole valley. And then the Chinese got into the steel business, and companies found it cheaper to go to China to buy steel that would take 2 months to get here, when we had a steel mill right downtown. And so as that business shifted, Cleveland, Detroit, Pennsylvania, a lot of cities in Pennsylvania just got left in the dark.
Yeah.
And so the renaissance really has to come from the government in a lot of ways, where they have to attract businesses here. They have to make it an environment that's inviting to businesses. And what do you do to do that? Well, sometimes you give them a tax break. Sometimes you do these enterprise zones, which is in the new tax code. I don't know how many enterprise zones that we have here in Cleveland, where you get a break on your federal taxes for a very long period of time if you invest in a business there. So there's things that you could do to drag businesses back here. Columbus is a really good example of this, because Columbus is not that big of a city, but the greater Columbus area is a technology triangle.
Yeah.
And that's what if you go 71 south, you're going to see, right as you get to the north side of Columbus, you're going to see a Microsoft building, a Microsoft campus. And they've attracted those companies there to be there and to grow there and to grow the economy. Columbus is booming. Cleveland is not. What is the difference?
I think some of it has to be what you're saying. It has to be with government economic policy.
Mm-hmm.
And yet here's my tendency, which this is where I want to go, like, what do we do with this? Because typically I'll see this and I'll let it sit on my desk. Oh, wow, more than half of Cleveland's children live in poverty. They're in households making less than 25 grand a year. Oh, it's terrible. Anyway, what's for lunch today? It's so easy to just go, this is horrible, and somehow I get a pass from this.
Right.
Do I get a pass from this? Is it my problem?
It is your problem because you live in the area and you're going to be subject to it. And if the schools are bad, if people are poor, if all these things end up eventually affecting you because they affect your property values. They affect the area. So
yeah.
I remember one time my wife and I were in Lorraine. It was in the summer, and I see this. It's like a bus, and they're handing out meals to kids. I'm like, what are they doing? My wife said, well, a lot of these kids in Lorraine are on a lunch program. They get free lunch, but in the summer they're not going to school, so they don't eat.
Yeah.
So the kids know that they can come here and they'll get fed. And so I think in the economy that we have right now, and we've talked about this, where it's booming, more people are getting dragged into the workforce than ever before. In fact, the economy has benefited the lower end of the economic scale far more in a better way than the higher end, because more people are working now. So the people on the high end of the economic scale, they were always working. For millionaires, there's no recessions. Right?
So in terms of,
I'm glad we've admitted it. That's good.
There's no recessions.
In terms of
Yeah.
employment, the economy's been good for those who are underemployed or unemployed.
Yes, yes.
Sure.
And it can get even better.
Yeah.
And so as that economy continues to expand, our government leaders have to find ways, sometimes creative ways, to drag companies back. And Ohio is a great place. Now, it would be better if we had a hub airport. It's very difficult for a region to grow when your executives have to stop in 3 other cities to get to the place that they're going. Right? So that's why Atlanta, Chicago, New York, that's why they grow so much. Houston, because they're hubs. So you base a company there, and your executives are not wasting away waiting for their next flight. And it's real.
And you attract, like you're saying, corporations that would want, because Amazon, I remember cities kind of stressing about that when Amazon was looking for cities to set their headquarters on, and you don't even make the list of your airports.
Right, but this is a great place because housing prices are realistic here. You go to San Francisco, you can't afford to live there. Nobody can afford to buy a house in San Francisco. Our schools are generally really good, and even though we don't have a lot of public transportation, our highway system here is excellent.
Yeah.
And we're also strategically placed right in between Chicago and New York.
Yeah.
So it's a great place. It's
That's
a great
true.
gateway. We've got the Great Lakes where you can bring goods and services in on the lake. And aside from a hub airport, we're really well positioned. So essentially, the leaders of Cleveland have totally dropped the ball on how we're growing this region. And they're the ones that are going to control it. Because as great as Avon is, where my office is, Amazon is not going to headquarters there.
No.
Well,
Right?
see, but this is why I'm glad you're part of these discussions, because certainly part of the equation when we're looking at the dramatic rates of poverty generally in Cleveland, but when you hear that you got over half of kids in Cleveland live in poverty, that's just like, it makes me want to throw up. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Part of the solution has to be Christians getting into government and economics and politics to advocate for really what these would be pro-life economic policies that lift up the value of the individual and their quality of life.
Yes.
Which is, I know it sounds awkward to say pro-life with that, but I really do think it's pro-life when you're raising up the value of a human life that's living in poverty.
Well, one of the big criticisms of some pro-life people is that, oh, we're all pro-life up until the moment that baby is born. And then we're like, hey, bootstraps, kid, lift yourself up. No, it goes deeper than that. And here's what I would do. I would cut the corporate tax rate to virtually zero.
So would I, by the way.
I-
I mean, cut it to 0.7,
And-
you know?
Because what
I would
happens...
love to really like test him and be like, why exactly, Ryan?
Because
Exactly. Don't answer.
Yeah.
Look,
because
we got to move
supply
on
and
now.
demand.
Yeah.
Economics.
Exactly.
Because here's
Macroeconomics.
the corporation doesn't really pay the taxes anyway. Who pays the taxes are the people who work for the company.
Yeah.
And so if you're bringing jobs in and you're raising everybody's level, you're raising the income of the area, you're bringing goods and services in, then people want to move to get those goods and services. Why they built a shopping mall? I remember I wasn't living in Avon. I was living out further west, and I had an office in downtown Cleveland. And I'm driving by Avon, and they're building this mall there. It's called Avon Commons. And Avon was really a farming community.
Yeah.
Like, who is going to come to Avon? Then I bought a house there. I went to Avon. And people want to live in Avon because there's so many things to do there. There's a Costco, there's a BJ's Wholesale Club, there's Avon, the schools are good.
Yeah.
They are the model of how to build a city. And they brought goods and services in, they brought businesses in, they kept taxes low so it was attractive to those people. They had good schools, and what happened? Everybody wants to live there. That should be a lesson, a textbook lesson for the leaders of Cleveland who have totally dropped the ball.
And now, as much as I agree with you that, we have to, as Christians, when we look at problems in society with this one with child poverty, we've got to look at economics. You can't look at just one area. It's multi-layered. But if we focus too hard on long-term economic goals, it looks dispassionate and it doesn't deal with the immediate problem.
Right, but you have to start someplace. You
No,
have
I
to
agree, you have to
solve the
start.
long-term. And
I
the way
agree.
that you do it is you give people the opportunity to have a good job and make a good wage. Because
That has to be part of the equation.
99% of the people that are collecting government benefits right now would rather work.
And that's very true. And I'm glad you said it that way, because I think one of the problems is that we create a caricature out of the poor. But what you're saying is true. I just want to say that I want to be sure Christians understand that we can't just talk about macroeconomics when we talk about poverty, because even if you're right, and even if we were to make these economic policy changes that over a period of 10 years lift people up out of poverty, tonight more than half of Cleveland's children are going to bed before the poverty line. They're not going to have dinner, and they may not have breakfast tomorrow.
That's right.
You see what I mean? And so there's an acute nature of poverty that we can't brush away with macroeconomic policy. We can't ignore macroeconomic policy.
Yeah.
But we can't also make that the big solution, because what we like to do is say, well, that's what we really have to do is do this kind of economic policy, and then we got to find a way to get these poor people who are moochers to stop sucking money out of the system. When there's a whole lot of problems with our welfare system that we probably don't have time to get into today.
We could adopt a family, Brian. Your church could adopt a family.
But David's going to create complacency. They're going to get lazy.
Deborah has an idea. She says an easy thing to do is to add money to your gas and electric bills, designating it to those programs that help those who qualify for assistance.
You know, here's what I would rather do. So I was in an airport yesterday, and I was a soldier, so I have a soft spot for soldiers and their families.
Is that a good salute, by the way?
No, it's not.
Sorry.
You gotta back it up with something. It's an empty salute. But I'm buying something, and they said, "Would you like to buy something for our soldiers?" And I said, "No, I'm not doing it." And the reason is because I don't know that program. I don't know what it. I would rather go to a soldier and his family and say, "Look, you're going to deploy. I want you to know we're going to help your family while you're gone. We're going to make sure that their bills are paid, and if they need financial assistance, we're going to find a way to do that." So I would rather do that. And I think that was the original, when welfare started, what it did is it lifted the responsibility from the church and it put it on the government. And the government is a really bad manager of most programs. Having been in the Army,
it's true.
I know this firsthand. Okay, so I would rather have a church reach out to somebody and say, we're gonna counsel you, we're gonna help you with your finances. We're not gonna just give you money necessarily. We're gonna make sure the kids are fed, everybody's fed, but we're gonna help you be wise. We're gonna help you get educated. We're gonna help you do these things and kind of stand in the gap. Now, there are a lot of government programs, and we've talked about this before, where the government programs are not, there's no gradation in the program. So you get a job and you're off that program. And now what do I do with my kids? Maybe you got a single mom with a couple of kids, and she wants to work, but if she works, she can't have the child care. So
how about people, they get a raise from their boss, which everyone thinks makes sense. But if they get a raise and make 25 more cents an hour, they lose all their benefits.
Yeah.
But they can't afford to live on the 25 cents more an hour. This is where I think Christians can advocate for sensible welfare reform. That is, like you're saying, it's gradations of release.
Yes.
It's you aren't just kicked out when you reach a certain threshold.
Or even
you drop down in tears.
Penalized for getting married. That's another thing.
Should be incentivized to get married.
Yeah. When you get married as a
that's
woman,
good for society.
You lose benefits.
For the most part.
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah.
We have to be very careful with government incentives because sometimes they incentivize bad behavior.
That's true.
So we have this social safety net. And the minute you get a job, what do? We cut the safety net down the middle, so you fall right through. So we can't allow those things to happen. In some way, I have read in the paper that the mood in Washington right now is pretty tense. If you're this, well then I hate you, and if you're that, well then I hate you.
Yeah.
And I don't know when we're going to get away from that. And I was telling my wife the other day, I've never seen it this bad. And she was kind of a history buff, and she was reminding me of how bad things were, in the 1800s, where they're not too dissimilar. So if we really wanted to solve and help people's problems, we probably would do some kind of welfare reform. I just don't see it happening. And we have to be
which
realistic.
is depressing. So then what? We just go, well, no, we can't do that because Janella reminded me earlier today of a story I shared a long time ago when I was teaching where I didn't know this. So I had this one kid who was really causing trouble in my class. And I was kicking him out of class for a couple of days. And we were right before like Thanksgiving break, let's say, or Christmas break. And one of the counselors came up to me and said, Brian, I just want you to understand what's going on here. His dad's a drug addict. And when he's at home, there's no food in the cupboards. So what's going on is this kid is stressed out. And he's acting out in class because he doesn't know how he's going to eat next week.
That's right.
And so like the consequences of poverty are so intense and so acute for children in particular that you're going to have problems in classrooms. And when they don't eat, they can't learn. And when they can't learn, they can't get an education. When they can't get an education, they can't get out of poverty.
Yes.
You end up having poverty be a trap.
Yeah.
That really, at the end of the day, when we have Washington can't fix it, we can advocate for macroeconomic policies, but it's going to take churches doing uncomfortable, excessively generous things.
And understand how poverty and its like the ramifications manifest themselves, because then you address issues that have nothing to do with what you think it has to do with and more to do with what you're saying. It's poverty, or they're hungry, or so it's
It's another reason why, as believers, we need to be good with money. We need to have a budget. We need to be managing our money wisely, so that when somebody needs something and we say, well, look, I already give my 10%. Well, that's a great start, bro. But that's where we start. Okay, we're not called to just give 10%. That's legalism. What we're called to do is to preach the Word of God always, and when necessary, use words. And one of the ways that we can do that, Brian, is we should start in our churches. That's where I believe so if you know somebody's struggling in your church and they can't buy groceries, you should buy the groceries. Well, I'm not going to be able to golf as much. Exactly. That's true.
the point.
That's true.
Yeah, in fact, I've been surprised in recent months as I've stumbled out of the scriptures, and I don't know how I missed it all these years, how often it's emphasized that we're supposed to care for the poor.
Yes.
Like, and there's one we talked about on the air last week. I don't know if you even remember this one, Dave. I certainly didn't. It came up in church on Sunday. Pastor quoted the verse. It's one of those where you kind of go, that's not in there. I don't remember.
I don't want it to be in there, but
So there was this where Jesus in Luke 11 is started to yell at the Pharisees. He calls them names and stuff because they're just being ridiculous. How about this one? You Pharisees are so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you're filthy, full of greed and wickedness. Fools! Didn't God make the inside as well as the outside? I remember that, don't you?
mm-hmm.
Did you know he has a solution for this?
What is it?
See, I didn't remember at all that he proposed for them a solution to
Mhm.
clean the inside of their cup, the filthy inside. So, clean the inside by giving gifts to the poor,
I'm out.
and you'll be clean all over.
I know.
And then he moves on.
Yes.
He said, oh, you know how you have that bad inside, you really don't love God properly, you're just extra, give to the poor. The other one that caught me by surprise, I remember telling my mom about this, and she goes, no, Brian, you made that up, that's not in the Bible. Let me look at this. So there's this drama in Galatians 2 where Paul's describing when he finally goes after years to meet with John and Peter, and he kind of wants their blessing that he's not out there teaching heresy. Like he wants to be one of the boys,
Mhm.
because he wasn't one of the original 12.
Mm-hmm.
So they have this big,
He wants to be one of the boys.
Yeah.
this is a Brian translation, and they go and there's a long meeting, and at the end, no surprise, they basically said, wow, you're doing a great job. They say, in fact, James and Peter and John, who were known as pillars of the church, recognized the gift God had given me, and they recognized and accepted Barnabas as their co-workers. They encouraged us to keep on preaching to the Gentiles while they continued preaching to the Jews. We usually move on. Then there's this line. There's only one suggestion. Their only suggestion was that we keep on helping the poor.
Yeah.
Comma, and then Paul goes, which I've always been really eager to do. It's like, it's such a big deal that they emphasized, he's already doing it. Like, don't forget, Paul, you're doing everything right. Don't you forget the poor. And he goes, hey, I'm taking care of the poor. I don't know that that's the temperature of the American church. Like, it was so important in the early church and from Jesus' teaching, constantly. You can make yourself righteous when you're doing the fruit of the Spirit, and it's caring for the poor. I think we've lost some of that. I've lost it.
So if I were to tell you that we know of a family that is not going to eat tonight, are you just going to walk away and do nothing, or are you going to try and solve that problem?
Like, if I personally knew if everyone wasn't
If
going to eat
I
tonight,
said, Brian, there's a family on my street, they're not going to eat tonight.
I'd make sure they eat. I think my faith in Christ would compel me to do it. But here's how, when our society separates,
Mhm.
not just racially, but economically,
Mhm.
I'm so disassociated with poverty that I can kind of not encounter it.
But I want to believe that most people, most believers that we know, would say exactly what you just
I
said.
know they would.
Right? So
They're not around poverty, Dave.
that's right. Because we know that there's a problem. We see it on TV. There's the news and all that. And we're like, oh, that's so bad. What's for dinner? We have to put ourselves in positions where it's going to have an impact on us, where we see it, and not just on TV, but we reach out and we touch it. We say, look, I'm gonna sacrifice something, and I'm gonna lift this person up. I'm gonna make sure that they can eat, first off, and then we need to address the deeper problems. And some of them are long term. They're gonna take 20 years, because when you're talking about government, they don't do anything fast. Nothing ever in government.
Which is
happens
why I'm
quickly.
saying that government solutions and economic policy are good and right, but they don't solve the acute problem.
Right. So I do think that churches need to take back from the government the hunger issue. That's our job.
Yeah, we should honestly take the whole thing back.
It's not going to happen. But
That's why the
let's be
government has to do
realistic.
it, Dave.
Let's
That's
be
why they have
realistic.
to do it. It's because we don't.
But we got to start someplace.
You're right.
So if all we did was start where people are hungry, and the kid in your classroom who's acting out because he's not going to eat and his dad's a drug addict, I've always thought, and this may be sexist, I don't really care, the men of the church need to stand up. And the men of the church, I think that's where the leadership is in most cases. The men of the church need to stand up and say, I'm gonna sacrifice for this person. I'm gonna make sure that kid eats and his brothers and sisters eat. And then everything starts
consistent.
working from there.
No, that's consistent with Scripture, because remember at men's conference a couple of years ago when Chris Brooks was preaching, he preached on a passage of Acts that I didn't even remember existed. A lot of that in my life, by the way, if you haven't noticed that yet.
Do you read the Bible?
I need
Brad?
to read my Bible a little more. But
No,
one of the
what is-
very,
I don't know what he's doing.
one of the very first
Talking.
conflicts in the early church.
It's a lot of talk.
No, but one of the very first conflicts in the early church was a dispute about equity in taking care of widows.
Yeah.
Like, they were so intent on caring for widows that the widows in the community, the Greek and the Jewish widows, were kind of like, hey, it's not quite fair how you're caring for us.
Right.
Do we have that? Do we have people going, you're really favoring those widows over that? We forget we have widows that are living in poverty.
And orphans and
And I'm talking to myself in this. I'm not trying to point fingers at anybody. It's like I keep being surprised for some reason by how much it's emphasized to care for the poor.
And by the way,
how much we forgot.
we are richer today than we've ever been in history. We currently, right now, at this very moment in time, you are living in the wealthiest country that has ever existed in any measure that you want to take. We are the wealthiest nation ever, and we still have people that don't eat dinner or breakfast
Isn't that
or
incredible?
lunch. It is incredible.
And it's babies. I mean, it's one thing. I can find a way to be callous towards a guy and come up with some
who
reasons.
doesn't want to work, who won't go get a job. And you know what?
But half of
we have
Cleveland's
to hold
kids,
that
Dave.
person accountable.
Yeah,
we
we do.
really do.
No, I get it. But half of Cleveland's kids
Yeah.
are living in poverty. Like, that should shake us as believers when we're told so often that we are supposed to take care of the poor.
So what do we do, Brian?
I'm the guy that talks, bro. I don't know. That's why I said I hesitated to bring this up, because I'm.
You want to do a food drive, fill up a semi?
I don't know.
It would help.
Sure.
I want to organize the churches and get some pastors together.
I'm not certain that a corporate solution is the answer. It's like individual Christians and individual congregations being reawakened to the idea of this charge we've been given to care for the poor, and to be reminded of it and do it. I don't know that, because it's a logistical nightmare to get two churches to do anything at the same time, and I think churches in affluent areas shouldn't get a pass. It's easy to get into an affluent area and then encounter first world problems. I don't think you get a pass if you're in an affluent area from caring for the poor in urban areas.
Here's what I tell my athletes.
Or in rural areas.
Okay, I tell athletes, you have this thing called personal capital that I don't have in this area. So an athlete's personal capital is they could get a football and have the team sign it and a jersey and have some people sign it. And they could walk into any CEO and say, hey, I just want to stop by and drop this jersey and football off for you. Do you have a minute? And they're going to say, yeah, because people love athletes, right? They're like larger than life people, and they're doing something that nobody else can do, and they're all unique and they're all genetic freaks in some way, shape, or form. You guys have that personal capital. You guys could go into any church.
She has that. I don't.
Oh my goodness.
She has much more of it than you
Much
do.
more.
I'm going to be honest
right.
with you. But you guys could do that. You guys could organize 10 churches who can then bring in 10 more churches to organize something to reach out to people that
Yeah.
maybe they haven't thought of, maybe they haven't done. Maybe they're doing it now, but they could do it a lot better if they had some teamwork. You have that personal capital.
And we got to do something with it. And we've talked about it as a team. We're praying
Mhm.
through ways where we can actually do that ground level advocacy and help for people in need. We're working on that.
But even the call individually for those listening, it's putting yourself organically in situations where you would even know people of need, single moms.
But I like that. Know people, not see people.
Know people.
in need.
And where I was going with that is we've talked about how condescending it could be to just be like, oh, you're poor here. Like, when you know people, you get to find out what their needs really are, how you
Right.
can really serve them. All people of need don't all have the same needs. So it's not like, here's a Walmart gift card, go get some food. It could be something else they need. And we won't know if we don't take the time to develop relationships. So you've talked about call a church and find out about a family, or I know Tony Evans has the program where you can adopt a kid. There's a lot of opportunities. So I'm saying I want to take it outside of Brian and Janelle and call, like, we're saying all people of God have a responsibility. And if we're saying don't just wait for the government to do it, all we can do is, what can I do about it? Because you can't go and call every church and be like, you know what you guys need to do?
You know what you can do is you can call your middle school principal and say, hey, look, if there's a kid there that's really in need, I would be willing to help.
That's cool.
So if they
Just call me. Yeah.
if they need school supplies, if they need clothes, if they need something, and they're really struggling, call me. I want to help. And you leave it at that. And we have done that before.
Yeah.
And they follow up on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know in Shaker.
I like that idea. It's really simple.
In Shaker, which is the city I live in, when I've seen people ask that on the neighborhood page, like 1 or 2 names come up. So they have people in these schools that are very connected in terms of the real needs, even outside of the school. So yeah, don't think it's like, I'm gonna sound so weird calling. Like, it's real, especially in certain neighborhoods, like in the urban areas or rural areas.
And you don't have to say, I'll do anything they need, but you go, listen, I don't have unlimited resources here, or
Right.
even a lot, but I've got enough to help.
And the principal knows who that kid is because he's probably sitting in his office a lot
Yeah.
because he's acting out
Yeah.
or they are acting out.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of things that we could do, but I'd rather see something on a grander scale with the churches in Cleveland, because it's what we're going to do, Brian, when you use your personal capital to organize people, is you unleash a powerful force for good. And these churches want to do this stuff. Pastors sometimes are a little bit leery of dropping another thing on their congregation. Well, okay, we're going to have another place we can give money to. But really, that's where we need to be. We need to unleash this powerful force for good. And where it starts with the leadership of churches,
Yeah.
and they want to be organized, and they want to be able to blame you for making them do this.
Yeah.
Be that guy.
Yeah,
Let them
and-
blame you.
And honestly, that's where we see, I mean, behind the scenes at the radio station, that's where God's guiding our station manager and us, is that more ground level
Mm-hmm.
thing. So pray with us about how God would use our personal capital in that way.
And feel free to use that phrase, that personal capital phrase, whenever you want. I'll give it to you.
Well, Janelle has more, so she'll have to use it more
Yeah,
often.
right.
She's-
Right. Oh, wow.
I'm just the arm candy.
That's right. I was going to mention that, but I didn't want to offend anybody in the
Sure.
because I don't like to offend people.
All right,
Onward,
family.
I'm
yeah.
just kidding.
Tomorrow's follow-up Friday. Special thanks to David Safransky, president and founder of Edgewater Investment Group. When you start your own company, you get to be founder and president.
Hello.
I'd like to start a company just for that reason.
And I'm also the janitor, by the way. I don't know, but I mentioned that.
Yeah, nobody ever mentions that part.
Yeah.
If you want to reach out to Dave, just reach out to us. We'll connect you with him. Thanks again, Dave, for your time, sir.
Thank you, Dave.
And
It's actually like this. That's a good solution. It would have been better had you earned it in basic training or something. but-
Bye, guys.
we'll see you tomorrow, follow-up Friday.